afternoon to all. Good afternoon to all. I'm Tyson Smith Berry Jr. Today, I will be moderating this particular platform, the web banner, our second web banner, under the title, Excessive Military Spending in Africa. Today is the 26th of May, 2021. And our agenda today, we have 5 speakers, but 4 have shown up, 3 have shown up, and we also have our panelist list. We have Tyson, which I am the chief moderator for this platform today, and we have Ernest, we have Paul, Stephanie, and Jessica. Jessica will do our interpretation, translation, while Paul and Ernest will monitor the chat for questions and answer. And for the recording and streaming, we have Stephanie who will do that for us today. Today, before we start, I would like to give the platform to Stephanie, who will do the introduction aspect of this platform, giving all the function of this particular web banner. So Stephanie, you are welcome to give all the function and overview of this web banner.
Sure. So anyone who isn't part of the internal team that is here, so we have the translation for French. So you just go down to the translation button on the bottom right of your screen, and you just select the translation that you want to hear. And for questions, during question time, we'll also use the raise a hand function, which if you go down to the reactions button, then there's just raise a hand there, and then your screen will move to the top left of our screen, and so that means that we know that you would like to say something. Alternatively, you can also write your question in the chat. So yeah. All right, back over to you, Tyson.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephanie, for that. Now we will turn over to the introduction, the general overview of military spending and the global call on military spending campaign, which will be done by Quit. So Quit, sorry for the wrong pronunciation of your name.
It's okay. Don't worry.
Okay, so we turn over to you.
Thanks a lot. I'd like to share my screen, if that's okay. Prepare a small presentation. Is it working? Is that a yes? Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah. So, okay. Thanks. So I just want to give a quick overview on the campaign on military spending that started 10 years ago now, first with the Global Days of Action, and that is part of the IPB's program, Disarmament for Development. And to give a bit of context on military spending for those of you or those of our viewers that don't know much about it, what CIPRI, which is normally the most accepted reference among the peace groups for military spending, what CIPRI considers military spending is all expenditures on current personnel, military and civil, retirement pensions of military personnel, social services for personnel and their families, operations and maintenance, procurement, military research and development, military construction, military aid, and that's part of the military expenditure of the donor country. We could even include some other issues in here.
Autre aspect qui peut être inclus dans la définition des dépenses militaires donnée par CIPRI, mais on va prendre la définition de CIPRI.
Just to see military spending within the the wheel that we call the military economic cycle, but it could be also called the armamentistic cycle, or just the wheel that takes us from public spending to the use of weapons and to conflict and to war. We want to locate military spending in the beginning of this cycle, as public money is what funds most weapons, because normally weapons don't enter the market per se. So it's public money, it's public resources, it's the money that we pay with our taxes that ends up starting this cycle that leads us to war. In here, we can also see military research and development. We can see, of course, the military industrial complex. We can see the financing by banks and other institutions. We can see, of course, arms trade, and then we end up in the use of weapons in conflicts. That is the most visible part of war, but sometimes we don't make the link with what's beneath it. And then, of course, there's this need of weapons and need of armies that is created by governments, created by the lobbying of the military industrial complex, and is created by think tanks. And this militaristic discourse that makes us think that we need militaries and weapons to be safe. So from the GCOMS campaign, why do we question military spending? First, because we've seen the history lessons. We've seen that arms raising, that military bloating doesn't lead to peace. This completely wrong idea of preparing for war if you want peace that Romans used is still used by militaristic approaches, and we of course question that because we have many lessons in history that building up armies and weapons has never led to peace. Also, because we question deterrence and brinkmanship politics, these aggressive and very machista policies that we see in the international arena. Then we question it because there's, of course, the interest of the military industrial complex, about which Eisenhower already warned, because the industry can have an interest different than those of the society and those of the people. Then we also question the homeland and security and national security approaches, because they identify some threats that the military cannot solve. For example, in national or homeland security doctrines, you can see cyber attacks, you can see terrorism, you can see organized crime, and those things cannot be dealt with the military. Sorry, I'm listening to a bit of noise. Maybe we can silence that, if possible. Okay. So the idea is homeland security or national security, depending on the country, that cannot solve many of the issues that we have now, as cyber attacks, terrorism, organized crime, and of course, it should not be dealing with other issues that are more humanitarian or more social. For example, migrations, climate change, pandemics, also social protests. These things should never be dealt with the military. And another argument we use is the huge opportunity cost of military spending. Every time we're deciding to spend on the military, we are taking resources from other sectors that can build human security, that can build peace. If we were to reduce military spending, we will get a peace dividend that will improve much better. It will improve our civil sectors. For example, our welfare state, the institutions that work for human security, and this happens in a context of austerity policies, no? That we see governments very reduced, but only spending in the military and in the police, only spending on the use of force. And we also consider that military spending causes, exacerbates, and perpetuates the emergencies and tensions that we're living, and is sustaining the power structures, the current status quo. So we also have this this approach that is based in social justice and is also based in environmental aspects, because this system is destructing the environment. This system is creating increasingly obscene levels of violence and inequality. So questioning military spending, it's also fighting for these causes. And then now, of course, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which has proven that the security and the defense that governments were providing was not making us any safer. And then, of course, there are ethical and humanitarian reasons to question military spending, because building up our arsenals, our work capabilities can never lead to peace. Just for you to see very quickly, this map is not quite updated. The numbers now are a bit bigger than this, but it's just for you to see the 30 countries that have the highest military expenditure. As you see, most of them are in the north. In this ranking of 30 countries, there's only one African country, which is Algeria. I will need to check if in 2020 this changed, but in general, the general trend is that the countries that spend the most are in the north, and only United States normally spends 1/3 of the total. This year it was 36%, and if we were aggregating NATO countries, it would be 56% of global military spending. I don't want to extend myself too much, so just for you to see what we're trying to advocate from the campaign, we're trying to defend the major reductions of military spending will free up many resources, many public resources that could be allocated to the emergencies that we're now facing. And here you can see only a few comparisons, a few percentages. For example, in 2020 we spent 1.98 trillion, and only with 0.03%, we could have provided to the World Health Organization with the solidarity response fund that they required. Only with 7% of it, we could finance the COVID-19 universal vaccination. Only with 1 day without spending in the military, we could save 34 million people that are now at risk of starvation. So this is what we've been campaigning this past month. We've been advocating for defending the military and defending people and the planet instead, and of course for healthcare instead of warfare. We reached 150 organizations all across the world in 27 different countries, 5 continents. As you see, our presence in Africa is slightly worse than in other continents. But I'm hoping that this conversation is gonna help us make connections and it's gonna help us open this conversation that we need to have about military spending. These are only a few actions that happened this year. Many actions were online, but in some countries it was possible to do things in the streets, and it was very nice to see it. And I'll be happy to get in touch with you by email or on social media, and of course now during this webinar. It will be a pleasure to have this discussion with you all. And this is just for you to have our email and social media contact. Thanks a lot, and yeah.
Thank you so much. Your presentation was well. We understand that military spending have many direct and indirect links between the military expenditure, armed trade, violent conflict, and the reduction of available resources for social and economic development. These funds used for military spending could have been diverted to agriculture, education, health, and just name them. But yet and still, we spend more on military than a social and economic development. So thank you ever so much for your well presentation on excessive military spending. Now we will like to get our first speaker. Our first speaker is Major General Prince Charles Johnson III. He is the Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of Liberia. He has vast knowledge when it comes to military spending, because he is the custodian of the budget of the military. So Major General Prince Charles Johnson III, the floor is open for your presentation. You have 15 minutes to present, between 10 and 15 minutes to present.
Again, let me say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. It is important to recognize and say a big thank you to the International Peace Bureau, the African Working Group, to discuss such an important topic, especially as we transition in the world. Topic: excessive military spending in Africa. What are the implications? I'm going to drive you through a couple of what Sanchez may reference to have been happening, and be specific when it comes to Liberia, the country for which I come from, and as head of the military. Excessive military spending is not a new to mankind, as Sanchez rightly stated. If you go back in history, we saw one of the major crises in the 400 BC between two Greek cities, Athens and Spartans. We saw the result of that war, of massive buildup of troops that left the issue of exposing their own citizens to severe famine and pandemic. As Sanchez rightly said, post-World War II, again, we saw superpower, rivalry, and massive military spending by building up the military that will have a deterrent posture and be equipped with nuclear weapon capabilities. Discussion on this topic matter is relevant in developing a more holistic, effective, and proficient way of addressing contemporary military and other threats amid economic constraints being faced by many African countries, as a reduction in military spending by African states will have important economic, political, and social effects. Effects of excessive military spending and benefits of reducing military spending. Though building a strong and vibrant military of a state helps to foster security and maintaining peace and stability, it does not in itself guarantee total peace and stability. It creates a high economic burden on states involved. Harms of excessive military spending in Africa. At the end of the colonial period in Africa, many African countries saw the need to build powerful militaries against invasion from neighboring countries who they consider hostile, rebels, and coup plotters coupled with armed dissidents activities in and around borders. This led to not only spending on conventional military forces, but also the establishment of auxiliary military forces. The establishment and funding of auxiliary military forces along conventional forces saw a rise in military spending in Africa. Most often, these auxiliary military forces are dissolved when there is a new regime and replaced by a new military forces. These kind of excessive military spending did not flow parallel to infrastructure and human development in many countries, which gradually created significant gaps in national development, thus leaving many ordinary citizens without basic social services. Moreover, inadequate development and security in certain areas of society, such as healthcare, food security, infrastructural development, and job creation can lead to more suffering of the populations, with eventually might contribute directly to civil unrest. Example, my country, Liberia. According to macro trends, the Liberian military spending and defense budget from 1965 to 2021, especially the highest, which according to macro trend states that between 1980 to 1985, that was the highest military spending in Liberia when we had the then dictator, former President Samuel Kedo, late. During that time, the military budget went as far as above 0.04 billion. With the hope, the president, that the increase in military at the time had an effect of peace. He was trying to have a peaceful country, not knowing it created the space for instability that led to our civil war in Liberia. Again, macro trend also explained that the second highest time we had a president with the highest military budget, just under 0.04 billion, again, we had a civil war or unrest. So you see the issue of the transition from more of what we would say traditional security to human security. Strategically, diverting funds from excessive military spending to the least developed sectors of society have directly impact on peace and stability. Funds saved from excessive military spending could be used for agriculture, medical, and other research and infrastructure development.
Les santé et pour des buts sociaux.
Terrorism, drought, pandemic, maritime crime, and massive displacement of people around Africa. These threats, when not addressed adequately, make the vulnerable populations no longer suffering and recruitment of violent extremist organization and terror group on the continent. In the past decade, military threats in Africa have been a significant shift from conventional military threats to unconventional military threats. Poverty, drought, diseases. With these new threats and changes in military, political, and social environment, there is a need for a significant shift in military structure and spending. Military in Africa should be restructured from large military forces to adequate size, equipped and proficient to counter effective contemporary military threats and contribute to the fight against other non-military threats. Liberia, as an example, like I explained in what happened in the last 30 years, as of 2000, our military spending, for which I supervise or head, had reduced significantly as compared to other sectors I mentioned previously. Today, our national security strategy is all focused on human security. According to the recent, just yesterday, the 25th, government presented a budget in the tune of more than 300 million. Out of that amount, the Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces of Liberia have around 6 million, and mainly towards the fact of how can we support them giving us the budget. One example, when it comes to infrastructure development, the budget is on the Ministry of Public Works that does road work and other work. They only ask us as the military. Another example we support is the Fishery Bureau. Since in turn we are shaped for providing human security that enable the environment, the Armed Forces of Liberia currently with its budget provide more of a supporting role to other agencies nationally than it coming under the military. This approach is from the Senegalese approach that we had the opportunity in 2011 to listen that it's better since we are providing supporting role to rather support this agency as a military institution than having the budget like what it used to be, because the focus is all human security. I want to conclude to say excessive military spending by African nations requires dialogue at all levels of society. It is important to analyze the threat in proportion to the cost of excessive spending on the military forces. The continent of Africa is faced with numerous challenges, ranging from military, social, health, etc. Setting spending based on analysis of the threats to peace and stability is a way forward for the economics. Limiting the expansion and formation of auxiliary military forces to complement already existing conventional military forces within the same operational environment is one way to curb excessive military spending. Furthermore, restructuring and realigning African military forces in line with contemporary threats can help limit excessive military spending. Thank you for this opportunity. I stand ready for any question if there may be. Over.
Okay, thank you so much, Major General Prince Charles Johnson III. It was great learning from your perspective when it comes to Liberia, when it comes to military spending, from the Liberia perspective and Africa at large. It was welcoming, educative, as you spoke on government creating auxiliary group because they don't have trucks within the existing military group within a country. So they re-establishing auxiliary group that they will spend more money on them is one way in which we can minimize the high cost of military spending in each country, in every country in Africa as a large. So thank you ever so much for your well presentation. It was educative. So we will get to you when it comes to question and answer. As the incoming presenter after that presentation, we'll have a roundtable discussion for question and answer. So keep posted. And secondly, our next presenter will be Mr. Michael Amuche, Chief Assistant Registrar, Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, Research Officer, Global Peace Association of Ghana. Mr. Michael?
Tyson, I'll just butt in here. Michael's has been having some trouble logging into the room. And okay. So he, if you just want to move to the next speaker whilst we try and troubleshoot a solution to
that. Okay. Let me check who is online for now. Syria, okay. Okay. Our next speaker will be Miss Syria Williams Bino, is the executive director of Novio de Lumi. It's a French name. So we will now sit back and listen to Syria. So Syria, are you online?
Yes, I'm there. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, I'm getting you well.
Okay. So my name is Cyril Roland Béchon. It's not Beno. I'm working with Nouveau Droit de l'Homme Cameroon here in Yaoundé. Since I not have not enough time to prepare my presentation, I will make it in French. I hope that will be okay for all the participants here. Stephanie said that there will be a provision for a translator. Is it okay or? Tyson, is it okay? Can I go in French?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Yes, you can speak in French, that's fine.
Okay. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephanie, for this introduction. And now I'm going to talk about the military expenditure in Cameroon. Like every pays in the world, we have some problems regarding military expenditure. And as our budget has augmented, also our military expenditure has increased as well. Kike, he has done a really good presentation about the situation in Africa, and we see the example of Algeria, and sometimes people believe that talking about military expenditure shouldn't be necessary, but as we have seen, it is necessary to start discussing and questioning why we invest in military spending. Why there are some other sectors that are not prioritized because governments prefer to spend in war. For us, it's not just the comparative analysis that is important, but also about our own situation in Cameroon. My commitment is the human dignity. That's the central point that this debate around military spending.
Tenez par exemple le nombre de morts que nous avons sur nos routes, n'est-ce pas? Parce que les routes sont extrêmement mauvaises.
Now we can see, for instance, what is happening in infrastructure. The schools, we have so many kids that has not access to school, to education. We have inundations, we have poverty. Our situation, our social situation is really good, is really important. We are really concerned about this. The government continues saying that there is no money for this, but we say, look, you can reallocate your resources. You can shore the resources for military spending and use it for the population. We have really big investment in the war and in the military, but what's happening with our situation, with our social needs? We see the data from CIPRI about the Cameroon.
Ces dépenses s'élevaient à 430 millions de dollars. Mais il faut dire que depuis 2015, les dépenses militaires
after 2015, we see there is this increase of military spending.
20 millions de dollars en 2016 et après à 434 millions de dollars en 2017. Vous voyez que la courbe, elle est quand même largement, tendue vers
and if we see the curve, we can see that there is a really concerning increase. Maybe we can see later by Kike can share the publication of CIPRI about military spending this year. But we see that we can have achieved the social cohesion in Cameroon if we have reinvest these resources in other things. Maybe Cameroon wouldn't have had the security problems as we have nowadays. We see there is a crisis in 2016. And this kind of social problems, this kind of social issues, they can transform in really structural problems, and this makes everything more complex. We need to say that from 2015, even 2016, Cameroon has acted to improve its military arsenal.
Mais comme vous le savez, il y en a parfois qui viennent sous forme de prêts qu'après le pays doit rembourser. Il y a tous ces soutiens-là militaires aussi.
There is a lot of support for military purposes. I don't know if data we can find it regarding the debt for military purposes and for this kind of materials that Americans have done or have put in this position for Cameroon. But now all these dispositives, they haven't achieved anything because army and military arsenal maybe they can show that there is neutralization, but there is not result actually. We have a war that has started in 2013, 2014, and we see this kind of organized actions could be used to show that the military spending is not enough by itself. It's not the solution for this kind of problems. It's not the solution to fight against this kind of conflicts or wars in the country. We cannot answer to the social issues, to the need of populations just by military expenditures.
Ils ont annoncé qu'ils devaient marcher pour revendiquer leurs droits, pour dire qu'il y a eu fraude électorale. Mais c'est l'armée qu'on a envoyée dans les rues avec les chars, avec tout ce que vous pouvez imaginer.
And we see that even in some occasions, the government has sent the army to even fight against people in the street. The population that speaks English, they also had complained about the need and the lack of social investments. The need is not to take the arm, but there is this feeling of dissolution, discrimination in the country that should be addressed.
Vous savez, même la Banque mondiale dit que les populations de l'extrême nord du pays vivent avec moins d'$1 par jour. Et si vous vivez avec moins d'$1 par jour, comment est-ce que vous allez résister? Comment est-ce que vous allez résister à un recrutement de Boko Haram qui vient proposer $5?
It is really concerning because the World Bank has said that some people live with just $1. So how can you fight for social needs? How can you live with $1 per day? These kind of things must be taken into account and even make some noise in order to raise this issue, in order to address more discussions around military spending that is really high. And it's not possible, people saying nowadays, that the solution is to have more arms for national security. We need to redefine the policy. We need to redefine policies. And we are not telling that you need to reduce military spending to zero, but reduce it, like discussing and seeing that there are some people that need to go to the school, that need to go to the hospitals, and they don't have the resources. And that's the discussions we need to bring now.
Je ne vois pas comment leurs amis, leurs frères ce serait levé pour porter les armes aussi. Donc, en fait,
I cannot see how this kind of military spending has also contributed into violence. We see that some minors, they have also been provided with arms. I think it's important to build a future together, that we need to bring this kind of discussions all together. Military is not the solution. Military is not the only answer. It's not the response for everything.
Nous sommes à bientôt 10 ans après. Il est plutôt bien installé. Donc, ça c'est des questions que nous devons réfléchir.
The question is to analyze, to really go deeper about what are we going to do, what are necessary. And I really think that one of the key and strategic points is education. Education for population. We need to advocate for sensibilization of population, because if they are aware about this, if they are aware about this kind of speech where we question the increase of military spending, they can advocate and they can ask for this, for the resolution, for the solution of the social issues. We have too many problems. We have the lack of water. We have the problem of diseases. So the only thing we can talk is not just military spending. Yeah, there is the question of money, but it's not enough. We have the money and we need to use these resources for social purposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, Mistress Bino. I did know, right?
Bichon.
Okay.
B.
Sean. Okay,
Right.
Bichon. Okay.
Good.
Thank you ever so much, Mistress Bichon. It was nice listening to you. We see the frustration in excessive military spending, where we are to use our finances, our hard-earned tax money to education, health, and other related fees of social and economic. We divert this money to high military spending. So we see how frustration it is. So this campaign will help us to resonate the message in our respective country on military spending, as we will engage. From my own perspective, we will engage our chief of staff, who is, the office is open to everyone. To get to him is very easy as compared to other ministers I see in the country. I just walk to the main office and the mayor welcome me, just like we've been knowing each other for a long period of time. So we say thank you to you both for your hard presentation. Stephanie?
Yes, Tyson.
Yeah, for Michael and Thomas, we are not getting them. Will we have a roundtable discussion for 10 minutes?
We might have a solution for Michael. So Ernest mentioned that Michael was going to try and dial in using just his audio, and this might work. I'm just waiting to hear from Ernest now if this is possible. So Ernest, have you been able to get in touch with Michael?
Yes, Michael is actually on the line, so.
He's on now?
Yes, he's on now through mine, so he's gonna speak. So.
You speak.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, you speak through your link, right?
Sorry?
Hello? He will speak through your page, right?
Yeah, he's speaking English.
Yes, I'll speak in English.
Okay. Okay. So our last speaker for today will be Mr. Michael Amoje, Chief Assistant Registrar, Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, Research Officer, Global Peace Association of Ghana. Mr. Amoje, you are welcome to speak. We gave you 15 minutes to speak to us on the issue of excessive military spending in Africa.
Thank you. Thank you. Excessive military spending in Africa. I would like us to look at what the implications are. This is a speech delivered by Michael Amwada of Global Peace Association of Ghana. Africa is a continent made up of 54 countries that are mainly dominated by least developing countries. Africa, again, is made up of 48 countries within the sub-Saharan enclave and 6 North African countries. The population of Africa is total
Donc, avec une population totale d'1 milliard
58,992,482. Characteristically, developing countries have a very low per capita income, very weak human resource base, and are economically vulnerable. Countries within this enclave also have a very low standard of living, courtesy the Committee for Development Policy of the United Nations. In Africa, out of the 54 countries, 13 countries are classified as least developed countries. Countries like Angola, Benin, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Central African Republic, Chad, Comoros, just to mention a few, are some of the least developed countries. But for both the North and South Americas, only a single country on the continent, that is Haiti, can be classified as a least developed country. The definition of military expenditure is derived from that of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, simply put, NATO, which says that, and I quote, all current and capital expenditures on the armed forces, including peacekeeping forces, defense ministries, and other governmental agencies engaged in defense projects, paramilitary forces, if these are judged to be trained and equipped for military operations and military space activities, quotation close. Military spending, again, includes all government spending on armed forces and military activities, including salaries and benefits, operation costs, military equipment, and weapon procurement, military infrastructure, research and development, headquarters and command support, courtesy Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. According to Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military spending reaches $1,981 billion in 2020, compared to 2019, an increase of 6% and the highest level since 1988. As a result, military spending as a share of GDP reached a global average of 2.4% in 2020. Even though military spending rose globally, some countries explicitly reallocated part of their planned military have a significant impact on global military spending in 2020. Military expenditure in sub-Saharan Africa increased by 3.4% in 2020 to reach $18.5 billion. The biggest increases in spending were made by Chad, which is 31%, Mali, 22%, Nigeria, 29%, as well as Uganda, 46%. As of 2021, Algeria has the highest defense spending budget in Africa, exceeding $13.9 billion and ranking 21st in the world. Egypt and Angola followed at around $10 billion and $7.7 billion respectively. Even though Africa is facing developmental problems, most of these countries are at war. Notably among them are Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Niger, Sudan, Angola, and Congo. Africa is home to some of the poorest countries in the world. Burundi, often regarded as the world's poorest country, has the highest poverty rate in Africa at 50%, closely followed by Central African Republic at 79%, Madagascar 78%, Republic of Congo 75%. At this juncture, I would like to reconcile military expenditure as a percentage of gross domestic product, that is GDP. This is a very useful tool for evaluating the importance particular states place on their military. In 2019, Saudi Arabia, I would like to go outside Africa by citing the example that in 2019, Saudi Arabia stands out from all other countries by allocating 8% of their country's GDP on defense and arms. China, also in Asia, has the biggest military in the world with regards to military personnel numbering almost 2.2 million people. It will be of interest to note that USA has the highest military spending worldwide, amounting to $778 billion. Narrowing down to Africa, so the table of African countries containing the various countries and their respective expenditure on defense. Algeria, $30,904 million. Egypt, $10,000 million. Angola, $7,615 million. Morocco, $6,000 just to mention a few. Maintenance of regional and international peace in Africa entails a lot of spending. For instance, as of 2019, expenditure on armed forces in Ghana amounted to over $223 billion. The UN General Assembly, as at 1st July 2019, approved a salary of $1,428 per soldier per month on a UN mission. Using Somalia as an example, the total cost of this operation at the end of 1993, when UNOSOM was in operation in Somalia, was $885 million. In April 1992, the UN passed a resolution 794, accepting US to lead a multinational unified task force, that is UNITA, to Somalia. During this operation, US contributed 26,000 troops and about 12,000 troops from 20 other countries. countries. The analysis here is how much would be paid a total of 38,000 tourists at $1,428 per soldier per month. Your guess is as good as mine. Such a huge spending on military in Africa may have far-reaching effects on development. African countries at an earlier onset, most of them are less developed countries. And excessive spending or excessive spending on military can be used judiciously to build roads, hospitals, schools, improve agriculture for food security, create jobs for the youth, provide good drinking water to enhance citizens' well-being. As I speak, the plan is for me to speak via Zoom, but Ghana also being a less developed country, we are faced with internet connectivity. That is why I am presenting my speech on an audio. For us to be able to find an antidote to effective military spending in Africa, one must first and foremost enumerate the causes of this conflict that necessitate the spending. The following can be outlined as the major causes of conflict and wars in Africa. 1. Bad governance. Second, human rights violations. The third, poverty. Fourth, ethnic marginalization. Fifth, small arms and light weapon proliferation. But all this can be curtailed if not eradicated completely. Citizens within these countries must uphold the principle of human rights, respect each other's views and opinions, as well as right to life. Again, conflict can be avoided on the African continent when conflicting situations are resolved through dialogues, negotiations, and exchange. Vigorous peace building mechanisms can also be used to promote peaceful coexistence. Finally, respect for rule of law, another mechanism by which we can curtail conflict. All this can be achieved with little or no cost, and by so doing, enough spending on military will be saved and channeled to a useful cause. On this note, I would like to bring my presentation to an end.
Thank you, Michael. Your presentation was educative. Thank you for sharing such information with us. Ernest, thank you for bringing Michael on board as well. This information was educative when it comes to excessive military spending in Africa. So on this note, we will have an interactive discussion which entails questions and answers. We will take questions from the audience so that our panelists or our presenter speakers can answer from their presentation. Questions should be restricted within their confirm of the presentation, not outside the presentation. So thank you ever so much. Any question?
Hello?
Any question?
You know, when there is no question, I have one question. I have no idea to whom I should raise the question. My question is,
Yes, Michael.
is there an own arms industry in one of the African countries, or are all African countries rely on arms export by the big industrial countries of the world?
Thank you. This question is related to everyone, right? All of the presenters, right? The speakers. Or
Feel
to a
free to
specific
answer.
person.
Feel free to answer who has some information and can give me some advices.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, speak.
If I may comment, when it comes to industry in West Africa, I will limit to West Africa. I know that there are other countries in Africa that on a minimum basis do like produce some kinds of weapon or shotguns and stuff. But in Africa, I would tell you in West Africa, especially Liberia, we don't have any arm industry there. We look up to especially the West, as you saw in Sanjay's presentation. I spoke about the 1.9 trillion budget, global military budget. So just to answer that question and be exact, in Liberia, we don't have any arm industry. We rely on like the US government, where we purchase our weapon and ammunition from over.
Okay. Thank you for that brilliant answer. Any question? Any question?
Oh, I have more questions, but I don't want to interrupt the others. So
I will just go right ahead, Rana, and just ask your question.
okay, thank you. You know, I have a question to this highly interesting presentation of the colleague from Liberia. Thank you, because I enjoy this presentation very much. But let me ask a little bit a provocative question. You described the army in Liberia a little bit like a civil service agency, helping developing the country, building streets, helping supporting the people end and end. Why do you not change the army and close the army and change the people working to a civil agency like Costa Rica was doing it when they closed their army 25 years ago?
Thank you so much, Reina, for such a brilliant question. I get that question most of the time, but I also try to tell you that let's understand the threat for which we have, the unconventional threat, especially of terrorism. As you are aware, terrorism, especially in the Sahel area, because we have seen terrorism now coming from North Africa, coming as far, expanding down to West Africa, as far as to the south, to the Atlantic Ocean, to my country. So what we did, we decided to have a force. You would definitely need a robust military, like I always say, to be able to counter terrorism. Like in Europe, I show where you come from, whether it's Germany or what. When Paris were on a threat, like 2 years ago of jihadists and some terrorists, they didn't use policemen, they put military in the streets. It was the mission of terrorism and countering terrorism. We know police can do it, but how far the sophistication of the police? So now having a sizable force in Liberia that will be able to counter terrorism, as we are now supporting in Mali, not to allow terrorism to cross down the Sahel to come down. With the United Nations missions there, it's an indication that yes, indeed, Liberia need a military. But when we speak of the issue of supporting the civil servant, it is important because the strategic objective of our security strategy, human security, but quote unquote, not forgetting terrorism being around. The best bet for terrorism, to counter terrorism, as we all are aware, is the military. So if you change now and don't have, another example I will give you why we do have a military. According to the AU, we do have a force in every region in West Africa that is called the Ecowas standby force. That just in case of anything, that force will be able to respond. We also have an in the Eastern Bloc, where you have those countries in East Africa that also have the Eastern Bloc like standby force in case of anything to be able to respond. You heard about Ecowas. You heard about a lot of these engagements, African-led forces in Mali. So these are forces that if you are in Africa and you say you will not have a military, who you think gonna come to fight for you just in case terrorism or any attack come into your country? So that's the need that we need to, like I said in my presentation, to retailor, realign the issue of military forces to the contemporary threats that we have. And terrorism being number one, there's a need to have military in Liberia to be able to also have that multilateral support to Ecowas standby force and to be able to fight terrorism. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Any other question?
You know, I think this is a very interesting topic for a future webinar, because I
Yes.
think the lieutenant will, the general lieutenant will understand that I don't agree with his position. From my point of view, military will not solve, to say it very general, military will not solve any of the terrorist problems, neither in Africa, nor in Afghanistan, nor in any other countries. It will absolutely not solve any of the terrorist problems in Spain or in France. When we not solve the background, the reasons why we have terrorism, and this is the social and cultural disparities in the world, we will not overcome terrorist systems. So, but this is, I think, a very deep and definitely also controversial, but I think highly interesting discussion we should have in the future. But thank you for your answer. Now I start understanding the both sides of your militaries. Thanks.
You
Okay,
see, Rena, what you're saying, just to come, you see, what you're saying now, these groups are already existing. These terrorist group, they are already existing. I understand what you speak, that this group comes from some of the making of some of these militaries or Western policy. Today, the conflict we had in the Sahel, a lot of people will turn it to what happened in Libya. Today, we saw the issue of a president of Libya being restricted and took other power. And we are seeing, what do we want? A peaceful, stable, or do we want to keep engaging the issue of people or instability in countries? There's a lot of ways we can discuss it, and I know, but with the current situation that we have, I agree 100%. Some of the things or the issues, especially in Africa, is the issue of national control. And how can resources, like our speaker from Ghana said, how can we distribute resources, our natural resources, to impact the people? That's why my country now, our focus of our national security strategy of human security, creating an enabling environment for our people, building schools, trying to see how best we can work and support other agencies. It's an issue. I think it's the next thing that we can discuss, and we'll be willing to do if RPB will want to do that, and we can discuss why we say this and how we think there's a need to have. It's not to say to justify. I will not sit there and say the military can handle all the issues of terrorism. Nope. Some of the issue of terrorism is not military. Nope. It's just how they like he said, about governance. Those are issues that need to be addressed.
Okay, thank you all so much, Major General Prince Charles Johnston. Chair, any question?
I believe that Kike did have a question before his hand was raised. Kike?
Okay.
Yeah, well, I was gonna build up on Rainer's point a little bit, because if you want an example of how military works, when you're fighting terrorism, you have 20 years of failures of the war on terror. The United States started after 9/11. It's been a complete disaster. It hasn't made the life of people in Afghanistan, Iraq, and many other countries better. It has cost billions to taxpayers, and it's a proof that the military is not the right tool when you're fighting terrorism. And maybe it's also about the concept of terrorism. How do we define that? If you talk about Paris or Barcelona, these attacks that we've had, the military was deployed afterwards. but they could not stop it from happening. To stop terrorism in this sense, in this kind of attacks, you need intelligence, and you need police investigations, and of course you need also another range of tools like more to social justice and to avoiding the extremism or the radicalization of people. And these tools are more related to welfare and to education, and this is exactly what we've been talking about here. Where do we put the resources? So I just wanted to add that. But I understand that from the Liberian perspective, what you guys call terrorism, it's different because it's actually paramilitary forces, and I understand that the vision on the military role there is different. But in the long term, it won't. I'm convinced it won't be solved by force. Violence only generates more violence.
Okay, thank you all so much. If there is no other question, we will now turn over to Stephanie. What does she have comment?
Just before Stephanie coming, may I please ask to leave? I have another meeting. You know, I'm in Washington, D.C., and I have another meeting at 11 o'clock, but I want to say thank you for this opportunity. Just to say, I want permission to just leave, and thank you.
Of course.
Oh, thank you. Thank you,
Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I don't have any comments or questions of myself, but the next part of the webinar would be the closing remarks, which will be given by Rainer.
Yeah, dear colleagues and dear friends, thank you so much for organizing and making these highly interesting, very diverse webinar with a lot of very different informations. And I enjoyed it really very, very much. And Tyson, thank you so much for bringing the General Lieutenant into this webinar. I think it was really a great support for the whole event. You know, I will not repeat and will not discuss about the developments in Africa. I think you know this much better than me, and I raise my questions. I really would like to make three comments at the end. First of all, when we are discussing about military development, military expenditure, wars and crises and conflicts in Africa, I think we should never forget that these are all results and consequences of the colonial system and the responsibility of the colonial countries for the actual situation and the developments in Africa. For me, this is a key point because this colonial behavior continues till now as engaging with military in African conflicts, but also for neocolonial economic and social behavior. And for me, a key point of all our discussions is how we are coming to equal relations of peace, disarmament, and sustainable future for both sides during the next years, for overcoming all these unjust trade agreements, not for any longer stealing the African resources for Western welfare. This is one important point. The second important point, and this was the background also of my question, is arms export from the Western countries or from the industrial countries kills day to day in Africa. The smaller weapons and the bigger weapons are mainly coming from the industrial countries, including not only the US, France, and Great Britain or Germany, but also including China and Russia. And for overcoming military conflicts and wars in Africa, I think we definitely need new international rules which forbid arms export. That is for me a key question for solving the problems of the world. These include the terrorist problem. Also, the terrorists are selling and buying these weapons somewhere in the world. And there are people which are becoming rich, and there are countries which are becoming rich. When I'm looking to the weapons in Africa, I can see very often the symbols and the signs of German industrial companies which were producing these weapons, which are killing people in Africa day to day. I think this is the second very important point for future developments. The third point is, and this I think is a question to all of us, when the African countries not raise their voices much louder internationally, in the international community, in the United Nations, and call more intensively for support for the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons, but also for the national discussion about disarmament, supporting the UN General Secretary in his work when he said disarmament is a key obligation of the international community, above all for overcoming the pandemic, then we will never get it. I think the voice of Africa, the civil society voice, the voice of parliamentarians, but also the voice of governments must be much louder to call for disarmament. And disarmament in this case means these countries which are spending the biggest amount of money for armament race must reduce first and dramatically, and then we are coming to the others. So I think this is a key point. When I remember that we had in the 70s international world conferences for disarmament, the last one is older than 30 years. We need again an international disarmament conference of the United Nations. I think GCOMS is doing a great work preparing such international activities on the level of states, governments, and parliamentarians. And by all the arguments and facts I heard today from your side, all the description of conflicts and wars and poverty and suffering of the people, of the corona pandemic and the consequences for Africa, I think one of the key obligations for all of us is to put disarmament and military spending again on the agenda of the work of the international world community, by the civil society, by the governments, by the parliamentarians. And for me, this webinar was one part of this long-term big development coming back to disarmament on the international agenda. Thank you so much.
Thank you ever so much. We have to live according to what we are about to do, like getting in contact with our respective government agencies that are responsible for this kind of excessive spending, so that we can be able to talk with them, try to retell the story to a surveillance government instead of military government. As the scenario in Liberia, we observe that the military in Liberia are highly involved in road construction, most often road construction. They help the future industry to patrol the border point, that Coast Guard. These are things that they are doing that we highly appreciate them for. So if other countries can follow suit or same trend, I think we can do a better in West Africa and Africa at large. So thank you ever so much. If there is no other comment or information, then I think the web banner can close because it's time, 3:30. We can close for now.
Yeah, thank you, Tyson. I'd like to have a brief meeting with Rina, if that's possible.
I'm available, no problem.
Sure.
Okay, then. Stephanie, good day.
Thank you very much, Tyson. Great job.
Okay.
And also, just a really big thank you to Jessica for translating. She did all of that on the fly with no notes whatsoever. So really well done. So yeah, and good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
everyone. Bye.
Bye, Lucas.
Bye.